Welcome to Marshall Knows Stuff. I'm Marshall, and I know stuff. Stick around and I'll show you how to know some of the stuff that I know. If you've been watching any of the previous Marshall Knows Stuffs, you'll notice that I've been using this terrible, terrible I-beam as an anvil. It works, and I got it for free. I know some guys at a steel manufacturing place here in town that just gave it to me. So I polished the top of it, punched a hole so that I would have a little punch for my anvil, and have been using it since. But the problem is, I-beams fight you back pretty hard. They bounce a lot because it's not solid steel, it's like a thin plate of it, and it's not very fun on the ears. It rings like heck, and after a few pounds, my ears are already ringing along with the I-beam. So I've been looking around for an anvil, and the prices on anvils just like spiked in the past 2 months to where they got out of my price range for just hobbying. But I had another friend who knew that I was making knives and asked if I wanted this. It's a piece of a railroad track. This is a solid piece of steel. Even this maybe 10 inches of it is probably still about 30 or 40 pounds, and it'll be effective for pounding on. Rings a lot less, and it doesn't absorb the hammer swing. So I'm actually really looking forward to conditioning this railroad track and turning it into my new anvil. So today we're making a new anvil out of a railroad track. Now that we know what our project is, we want to know what our end goal is. The anvil build is not going to be as complicated as some of my other projects. Pretty much all I want to do is flatten the top and polish it, because whenever you're hammering stuff on the railroad track or whatever else it is, you don't want what's on what your hammering surface is to transmit up into what you're hammering. If there's inconsistencies in the anvil, when you hit hot metal on it, it's going to imprint that on the other side of your working tool, whatever it is that you're working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out with one of my favorite tools, my angle grinder with the cutoff wheel. I'm going to take off all the top of the railroad tie, make sure that it's nice and flat, and there's also a little bit of a curve to it. I want to get rid of that. And if you'll notice, at the end, this thing was cut off with an acetylene torch. You can see where it's cut off. I'm going to flatten that out a little bit, because whenever you're hammering something you want to come to a curve, you're going to be hitting it over the edge of that, and you want it to wrap around, and you don't want this to transmit to the underside of whatever you're working on. So I'm going to flatten this out with the angle grinder, flatten the top with the angle grinder, and then I'm going to polish it all so that it's nice and smooth and it won't transmit any pock marks or lines or inconsistencies into whatever it is I'm hammering underneath. Like I said, I'm going to be starting with the cutoff wheel on the angle grinder. That's going to give me real quick results on just getting everything gone. And then I'm going to be using a series of polishing wheels on the angle grinder. I can skip a couple in between. I'll probably just go with the 40 grit, the 220, and then I'll probably end up with the 400. I don't really need to go as high as the 600 because it doesn't need to be real shiny. It just needs to be polished enough to where there's not any lines on it. And then I'll probably finish off with a little sanding wheel. So I'll switch over to the time lapse and just get going on that. If there's any hiccups that I run into along the way, then I'll stop and I'll bring them to your attention. But like I said, this is a pretty straightforward build. We're just going to be polishing this piece of metal real quick. Now I know I always preach safety. Safety glasses gloves, good, sturdy, heavy leather gloves, are important for grinding. But one thing that you may not realize, and I usually don't neglect, is wearing a respirator whenever you're grinding. The reason I didn't wear it this time is because my beard gets in the way. It's, these things don't really work with the beard because it doesn't create that seal around your nose and mouth. But I'm going to have to pay the price of black boogers for about 3 days after this from breathing in all the dust and stuff from that. I went through almost a whole grinder wheel trying to do that. It's a lot of steel. There was a lot of steel that I made it through, and I'll tell you what I did find out going from one side to the other. The side that I just tried to polish off, it took a long time to do just using the edge of the blade. So I did it a lot faster and a lot cleaner on the other side, but it's taking the grinder and going straight down, cutting a straight line in it. It's actually more effective and faster doing it that way. So little tip for you, if you're going to be doing this and you need to cut that side off, go straight down, make your line, move your grinder back and forth on that line, and just go straight down on it. It's going to be a flatter and faster line. That moved through that little grinding wheel pretty fast. That thing's trash now. Now we're going to move on to the 40 grit and start giving a little bit of polish to the top of it so that it's nice and smooth. You might see indentations from where you hit it with an angle grinder in the cutoff wheel, or previous hammer hits, or something that was on it before you started working it. But whenever you're working with the 40 grit, that's when you really want to start working some of that stuff out, because when you move to the smaller grits, it's not going to be able to take that steel away as effectively. The 40 grit was actually surprisingly effective in polishing this. I'm surprised at how smooth it got. I think I'm actually just going to move right on up to the sanding wheel because I'm already pretty polished, and I actually don't need a whole lot more than that. I did all those faces with that 40 grit, and it's pretty shiny there. I don't see any inconsistencies that'll be transmitting any pock marks or anything else onto whatever I'm hammering. So I'm just going to give it one more shot and smooth it out a little bit, and I think we're going to be done with this thing. There you go. Easy peasy 1, 2, 3. We just made ourselves a new anvil to hammer on. It's not as polished as I would have it on a knife or anything like that, but it's going to be plenty good for hammering on. We're going to go and put some dings in it now. I'm actually really excited to start using it. Last week was my rebar knife build, and in doing this one, it gave me some wicked cool ideas for my next build, and I'm going to get started on that now. So stay tuned, and remember, like, subscribe, tell your friends, and let's keep knowing some stuff.